Good morning, Andrew.
Good morning, Rich.
Excited to have you on finally, man.
Hey, I'm honored to be here. I appreciate you extending the invite.
Absolutely, yeah. As a for those of you that are just joining us or maybe going to listen to the podcast to come, we are going to be talking about the practical guide to cybersecurity. And as you know, Justin Carroll is one of my very best friends, and of course, he wrote the book on this, had the podcast on it, etc. Worked in this space for quite some time. Doesn't anymore. So I've had my toe in it a couple of times. Your world. But I'm fascinated by it. Of course, my son, as I think you and I have talked about before, has lectured at MIT on this topic, cybersecurity. That's his master's, and that's what he did for a national laboratory for the government for years. So this stuff has been around me. But when I was looking at your slides, I'm like, this is going to be a good show. And in full disclosure, if you want to find the full presentation, it's not there now, but it will be if you're listening to the podcast to come. AmericanWarriorShow.com. Go to the show notes page, and you will find Andrew's full presentation. Today, he's going to be giving an abbreviated presentation, but if you want to see the full presentation that keeps you and your family a little bit safer in cyberspace, take those practical tips and put them to good use.
Yeah. And just comment on Justin Carroll's material. I've got his 2 books on my desk right here. So definitely the Bible and security and privacy. This is a little bit different. It focuses more on not getting to the invisible stage online, but how do you protect yourself, your family, your kids, your parents, that kind of thing. So
yeah. I'll go ahead and read your bio. We got Michael Gentili's on. Our good friend Dr. Fuller is on. Says, Andy, looking solid there. And what's your relationship to Dr. Fuller?
Well, TC was my firearms instructor at the Vermont Police Academy in 2003. So he got me started on the whole handgun journey back then.
Small world. Dr. Fuller's like Judge Holden in the book Blood Meridian. He's everywhere and nowhere. Will Parker is on out there in Montana. Don Bothwell is on, and Tony is on. Please like and hit that share button. I'm going to go ahead and read Andy's impressive bio. Andrew Frisbie is a senior level cybersecurity professional in the financial services industry, currently responsible for defending about 2,400 employees and about 3,000 information system assets in banking, insurance, and retirement plan businesses, as well as sensitive customer and company data from cyber threats. He is responsible for cybersecurity operations, information security, third-party risk management, and leads other groups focused on insider risk management and artificial intelligence. Andrew's professional career spans information technology, law enforcement, computer forensics, and cybersecurity. As a law enforcement professional with a technical background, Andrew investigated computer-facilitated aspects of homicide, child exploitation, and fraud, and later becoming a testifying expert in the private sector on matters related to corporate insider misconduct. Andrew holds certified information system security professional credentials and is expecting to receive his master's in business administration and cyber security risk management degree this December. His amazing wife of 26 years and their 3 children are his daily motivation and his mission in life, as are mine as well, Andrew. Glad to have you on the show.
Thank you, sir.
Let's go ahead and jump into it. As I told you in the green room, my dear friend, I'm going to keep you moving as much as possible and just pop in questions as necessary. This is a really detailed professional presentation, and I would really love it if you could just kind of shepherd us through this process.
Absolutely. I've got the presentation up here on my computer as well, so I'll try to stay a step ahead. So if we want to just go to the topic slide, the next slide there, really the way I approached this presentation was trying to introduce cybersecurity and cyber self-defense to the physical self-defense community, right? There's a lot of overlaps, and I think you can appreciate that. It's usually fear of the unknown that holds you back, and especially with technical topics, right? So if you don't know, if you're not a technical person, you're not comfortable in the digital realm, that prevents a lot of people from doing anything. And protecting your family and protecting yourself in your digital world really isn't that difficult. And so the larger presentation that I built for your audience, Rich, is designed to give them that initial level of awareness on the threats and the threat actors. And then we roll into kind of a personal cyber defense plan. And then we talk about, okay, how do you defend against those threats now that you have the plan in place? And so we're just going to breeze through that a little bit today.
Sounds good.
So a couple of foundational concepts to get everybody started. If you are on the internet and you're online, your life is hackable, period. Okay. Doesn't mean you're a target. Just means that you probably got some vulnerabilities that you need to address there. Knowledge and awareness is key. We're going to talk about that. A lot of people hear about cyber attacks in the news. We hear about advanced persistent threats and nation states and cybercrime gangs and all that stuff. These groups do impact you, right? You might not be a direct target, but you might be an indirect target. Your information might be stolen. That stolen information can compromise your identity, so on and so forth. Really important point here. The cybersecurity industry is just overrun with startups and whiz-bang technology. You can ignore all of that in personal cyber self-defense, right? Focus on the fundamentals. I think this community appreciates that when you're talking about training fundamentals. If you don't master those, the fancy stuff really, has no place in your plan, right?
Mm-hmm.
The mindset piece is really important here. So I hope that an outcome of this is that everybody starts thinking in terms of assumed breach. Like your life is already breached. Okay. Your information is already out there. My information, my quote identity has probably been stolen half a dozen times by now. All right. So we have to assume that our information is out there. It's been stolen. You've got to take steps to sort of protect against the misuse of that. A big part of this presentation and this plan is protecting the young and the old in your life. Often we internalize and we say, okay, how do I protect myself? But we have a responsibility. I think a lot of us are in the sandwich generation here, young kids, aging parents. We got to account for them. And then finally, you can't defeat every problem with technology. Some of this is just good old fashioned communication. So
sounds good.
And we kind of already touched on that. I mean, I just want to say that the older folks in your life are usually targeted for money. You're targeted for money and access to information through your employers. Children often targeted for exploitation, physical exploitation, or identity theft.
I talk through this real quick. So you're in the banking sector, and you are the security guy for a regional bank.
Yep.
Man, I tell you, my son-in-law. He lives next door, so I hear it every day. He works in the banking industry at our local bank here in the small town that we live in. And he's like, every day, that is most of what he does is deals with elderly people that have been scammed and trying to stop it or get their money back. I mean, you're so right to bring this up. They're a threat, and your children being exploited is the new thing that I'm hearing about. And I think we'll talk more about that later, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a sad reality that with age. I think we might have just lost Rich there.
No, you're there. I just want to.
Okay, yeah. With age comes a lot of vulnerabilities, loneliness being one of them, and the threat actors know exactly how to exploit that. There's a lot of scams that are targeted at elderly folks, and I've seen them literally turn over their life savings, hundreds of thousands of dollars, because they build trust. Then the fear factor comes, and they liquidate everything.
Yeah, I had when I was with the American Red Cross, my key volunteer, him and his wife had never had children, and he's in his late 80s, and he's like, "Hey, Rich, would you handle my estate when I pass?" I'm like, "Absolutely." So he told me what he wanted to do with it. And it was a very sizable sum of money, about $1 million in cash, and then I'd have to sell off his assets and then add all that up and then hand it over to this foundation that he wanted to gift it to. And when he died, his wife got scammed out of basically everything but the house. Took every freaking penny of the life's work because she fell for the scam where it was one of those deals where this guy posing as a Navy rear admiral, handsome fella, older fella, online, of course, doped her for every bit she got. And she went to her grave believing it was real. And eventually she would meet him. So, and this was years.
Yeah.
She was drained. God bless her.
And the scam hasn't changed, except now they move the money into cryptocurrency, and it's very difficult or impossible to recover when that happens. So, it's a real problem. I thought that it would be good to sort of compare physical self-defense, attributes of physical self-defense to attributes of cyber self-defense. There's a lot of overlap here conceptually, right? And I think to get through the fear of the unknown factor, the community can look at this and really see the similarities. So there's no guarantee of safety in physical or digital, self-defense, right? The targets are different. On the physical side, the target's human. On the cyber side, the target is usually information, right? Identity, data, financial accounts, so on and so forth. But as in a computer facilitated crime, it can be used to commit physical crimes, sexual abuse and exploitation. The objectives are usually different, right? In self-defense on the physical side, our objective is to prevent bodily injury or death. On the cyber side, we're trying to prevent financial loss in most cases. But as you'll hear me say over and over again, for the most vulnerable population, it could be to prevent, abuse or loss of life. On the risk management side, on the physical defense side, the strategies really come down to knowledge, training, physical fitness, mental fitness, situational awareness. We've got certain tools in there, lethal and non-lethal defensive weapons. Over on the digital side, we have a similar, risk management strategy, right? Knowledge and training, mental fitness, situational awareness. Toolboxes are different though. We have privacy and security focused technology and a strong value system.
Before you talk about the cybersecurity thing, what I love about you and Justin, and then juxtapose you two guys relative to my son, for example, you guys have a law enforcement background. You see both sides simultaneously. And I think that's what makes one of the reasons why I want to talk to you. You're not just a cyber guy. You've been in law enforcement, and that's what segued you into this lane, if I understand that correctly.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, I'm 52 years old. There was no such thing as cybersecurity when I started out. There was no degrees in cybersecurity. So the people in our kind of age bracket, that 10-year window really kind of had to evolve their way into cybersecurity through law enforcement, military, information technology, all these different backgrounds. And so now the younger folks, they can go to school for it. They can get some academic training on it, and so on and so forth. But it does give you a different perspective when you've seen the criminal aspect of cyber. You see the worst of the worst. So.
Thank you to the folks jumping on here. Brian is on out there in North Texas. Matt is on from Tulsa. My good friend Cruz is on up there in Rhode Island. Will Parker says, I believe in dealing with these scammers with JDAMs. Total scorched earth. This method would make it self-correcting problem. James is on from Massachusetts. Good morning, James. Please like and hit that share button. And now back to the show. Yeah. You there, Andrew?
I'm here. Yep.
Go right ahead, sir.
Yep. We can move right on to the
next
one there. All right. So I wanted to give some perspective on how cyber attacks actually happen. Usually when you become aware of a cyber attack, that is the very end of the process. And so there's two perspectives on this. One's the Lockheed Martin cyber kill chain, and the other one is the MITRE ATT&CK framework. I see my box got moved when I converted it to PDF. That should be around the impact one on the bottom right there. Okay. Basically, what you need to know from this slide is this. And those of you who are former military, you know the kill chain process, but there are many stages in the course of a cyber attack where you have the opportunity to apply some countermeasures, intervene, stop the attack before boom happens, right? On the right side, when we talk about MITRE ATT&CK framework, that's less of a linear process and it's more of a tactics, techniques, and procedures process. Those don't have to occur in a linear fashion. The objective, though, is to stop those tactics, techniques, and procedures before impact, before boom. So when you hear of ransomware in the news, right? Ransomware is boom. Okay. It's all the bad stuff has already happened. It's been going on for days, weeks, months, whatever. and somebody missed all of these stages of the cyber attack before that happens. It's much more simple on the personal cyber defense side of things, but you can still apply this framework, right? Your objective is to do things, simple things in advance, so the bad guy doesn't get to the boom stage.
And again, we talk about these things because on the Monday show we talk economic threats and global affairs, things as it relates to preparing yourself and your family. And it's just not all guns and gunfights and car chases, to use a funny thing from a movie I like. These are the threats that are going to hurt you, your family. And a cyber threat could be anything from cyberbullying that leads to your daughter fashioning a noose in the bathroom kind of thing to draining your finances and making them unrecoverable. I mean, so the thing about American Warrior Society is, and you're a member, Andrew, and you know this,
Yep.
It's the holistic 360-degree idea of personal security, right?
100%.
That's what today's show is about. One more attack vector in your family's life is the device you carry in your pocket that you trust with everything until it turns against you, or the laptop that I'm speaking on right now,
Yeah. And I think this next section here is going to be an eye opener for a lot of people. So when we talk about personal cyber self-defense, I think of three groups of threat actors. I think of advanced persistent threats. These are your nation state actors. I think of cybercrime actors. And then I think including child predators as an absolute must in this self-defense plan. It's not traditionally part of a cybersecurity framework, but that is in law enforcement. I worked on the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. I saw this stuff firsthand. I'll be the first to admit that a lot of my colleagues stayed on the job and they did way more than I did, but I saw enough to see how ugly it is. And I know you've had other guests talk about that. So we'll get into that a little bit and open people's eyes here on this. So when we talk about APTs, advanced persistent threats versus cyber criminals, there's a couple of important differences here. So the APTs, which are typically the nation states, we're talking about, China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran primarily, they focus on espionage and sabotage, right? They're politically motivated. They typically have high operational security and a stealth approach to things. The cyber criminals, there's not a lot of difference in capabilities today between APTs and cyber criminals, but the motivation is very different. Cyber criminals are motivated usually almost entirely by, for financial gain. And that's where your ransomware actors come in, your extortionists, all this kind of stuff. So I kind of already mentioned who the primary players are here. I in the next few slides, we'll go through a couple of examples on why China is a threat, why Russia is a threat, why North Korea is a threat. And the reason is you need to have this global awareness of who the big players are, because when an attack happens, there's a supply chain effect, if you will, a ripple effect that can impact your life. This is where the crossover happens between cyber and preparedness. And so we'll talk a little bit about that.
Let me ask a question real quick, just to clarify. I realize that China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, they're all threats to the United States government. They're attacking relentlessly 24/7, every millisecond, literally.
Yep.
I don't think it really, but are you also inferring, or am I to infer that they're also potentially attacking Rich Brown or Andrew Frisbie or your institutions that you work for, Andrew? Which one are you saying?
Yeah, there's two parts to this. So first, you may personally be a target of an APT if you work for a high value target, right? So if you're employed by a defense contractor, any entity, in our 16 critical infrastructure sectors, if you're a software developer that provides software to any of those entities, you could be a target, right, as an initial access vector. But more importantly, when an APT attacks, perpetrates an attack, that ripple effect in the supply chain can impact you personally. So one of the examples we'll talk about with Russia is, when they attacked Ukraine in 2017, their little version of TurboTax, and that impacted, that spread through the ecosystem globally and impacted companies like Merck, Maersk, FedEx, that disrupted supply chains around the world. Well, how does that rolls down to you from a preparedness aspect? We'll talk about Colonial Pipeline, right? When all the oil stopped flowing through 5,000 miles of pipeline on the East Coast. That's how cybercrime and APT can affect you indirectly. And so a couple of examples of that.
I'll give another anecdote just as a data point for people to think about. So the presentation my son gave at MIT was relative to him and his colleagues had developed an algorithm and a program that would make your car unhackable, right? That's one of the things they're doing. I mean, I think people of mine and your age, Andrew, we think of, well, it's a car, it's four wheels and a steering wheel, right? No, you drive a computer that just happens to have wheels on it. Then, so my son wrote this paper. MIT's like, we want you to talk about it. Well, as soon as the paper was published, probably within 72 hours, he got an email from this guy a Chinese nation state actor who was trying to, hey, can I get that algorithm from you? We want to study it. And so Grant calls his professor, and the professor's like, sure, give it to him. And he told me, I'm like, time out, bro. You need to, this is not something for your professor to decide, because the code that they were using, I won't say specifically what it is, but it's the same one that our tanks, and it's a military protocol, right? That just happens to also work with vehicles. And so he called the FBI field office, or the professor did, and Grant got interviewed and passed all that off to them for a counterintelligence investigation. But yeah, man, like you said, if you're in that line of work, Andrew Frisbie is without question an attack vector to get inside the financial institution you work for. Am I correct in saying that?
You absolutely could be. Yeah. So, I think it's important, just from awareness perspective. Like, we don't want to pass off the nation state attacks as being unrelated to personal cyber self-defense. You don't have to be paranoid about it, but you do have to be aware when you hear of an attack happening. The question to ask is, okay, what's the downstream effect on me and my family? How do I need to be prepared against that? Is this a supply chain attack that's going to affect the food supply? Or is this a critical infrastructure attack? Are they shutting down a water system? One recently in the news, Rich, the Secret Service discovered a SIM farm in New York City. Okay, I think it was last week. And the SIM farm, they had 100,000 SIM cards in the SIM farm. And the objective of that is to spam people, right, with texts and all this kind of stuff. But the one comment that I picked up on from the Secret Service was that there was enough bandwidth in that SIM farm to take down the cell network in New York City if they decided to do that. And what was in New York City? The UN meeting, right?
Yeah.
So these are things. These are the unknown unknowns out there too. We have to kind of plan for, what if the cell network goes down? What if our water system goes down and we're in an urban area? This can all happen with through a cyber attack. So.
Yeah, I saw that. I haven't read everything on it, so I'm glad you gave me at least the Cliff Notes version as to what that was all about. But my God, man. Can you imagine the ripple effect if you did that?
Yeah.
Wow. And Michael Gentili says, the easiest hack in business is just to ask for access. The human is the most vulnerable part. And I don't know what your presentation says, but I've been told that the human is the most vulnerable part in this whole thing. All the protocols mean nothing if Betty sitting at her desk like, yeah, sure. Or she clicks on the link and go, yeah, you can update my computer.
100%. I mean, and that's the self-defense plan that I have in the guide for everybody addresses that. But in the business world, in my job specifically, we have to account for that in our control framework. So I accept the fact that humans are going to make mistakes, and I've got to have layered system of countermeasures in there to catch those. Right, I can't prevent it. But on the personal side, if you don't have basic things in place, sure, it's probably easier to fall for a phishing email or something, or give your credentials over. You might not have that, the same warning system there. So, yeah. Good point. I think we just talked about this, which is, yes, you can be a target of of a nation state. So what is China's offensive cyber strategy? All right, espionage, total data dominance. They're well known for their efforts to exfiltrate intellectual property from U.S. businesses. But you'll see with China and Russia, they have two functions. They have an espionage function, and then they have an offensive function that usually operates under their military. So the espionage function, their objective is to steal and spy. The offensive function, their objective usually is to pre-position in critical infrastructure for the purpose of future sabotage and destruction. A couple of examples that you've heard of in the news: Salt Typhoon. And these, you can see how these could impact you. Salt Typhoon. This is the espionage group affiliated with the Chinese Communist Party, right? They compromised 9 major telecommunication companies last year. What did they get? They got some text messaging. We're going to talk about how to defeat that. Geolocation data, communications metadata. They even breached the Fed's wiretapping system. Volt Typhoon operates under their military apparatus, and their objective is to pre-position in critical infrastructure, and they have. And there's been lots of news stories about this, that China is pre-positioned in our critical infrastructure. So when that kinetic, event happens, they can initiate the sabotage, denial of service, destruction on our critical infrastructure.
Can we and let's give some specificity to what I believe you may be talking about. I have heard, I think it's the FBI reported this, that there's just a ton of Chinese malware sitting in our electrical grid, whether it's on large power transformers or wherever it is, it's sitting there and we don't know what it's doing. I mean, it certainly could be monitoring, or it certainly could be something that just switches it off at a time of their choosing. And if we all think of the attack that is inevitable on Taiwan as we would see the boats streaming over, and well, no, if they turn the lights out on us, we're not going to know anything.
Yeah, it's a huge risk. I think, and this, I don't claim to be an expert in it, but I do study it. The challenge is our infrastructure is so antiquated, and the objective of pre-positioning is to get as close as you can to the cyber physical systems, right? So if you think about the flow of oil, or the flow of, water through, even I would imagine, I don't know a ton about the electric grid, but anything where that cyber physical interface occurs, we have a division of networks. So we have the IT network, and then we have the OT network, the operational technology network. If the threat actor can shut down the IT network, they make the operators of that environment blind. Operators may have contingency plans to keep the OT network running, but if they're able to breach the OT network, that's where they can influence things like temperature gauges, pressure gauges, flow control valves. They can shut things down, right? Dams, all that kind of stuff. And so the risk that ultimately everybody's warning about in the news is that our systems are very antiquated, and the FBI and others have already identified China and Russia pre-positioned in our critical infrastructure. So from a self-defense planning perspective, again, not a direct attack on you, but it certainly bleeds over into preparedness if your water system's down or contaminated for a week. So
you and I were texting last week when I was on vacation, and we were staying on an island, and we lost water to the island. And I just 16 hours without water, without the ability to flush toilets. I mean, it wasn't like we had a boil notice. We had no water, and somebody trucked over pallets of water. But by the time we got the message and went there, the water was gone. So, you think you're pretty prepared until they turn the damn water off, and then you find out how vulnerable you and your family is to something like that. So great. What is and I think, again, all you have to do is look what we did with Stuxnet to see just the infrastructure damage that can be done with a line of code. Absolutely.
Yep. Absolutely. So moving on. So the one key takeaway here, we won't spend a ton of time on this, but China has established their legal system to facilitate data collection. Okay. From if you are a entity that maybe operates on foreign soil, but you're domiciled in China, you are required by Chinese law to produce data at the behest of the Chinese Communist Party. Often these companies have cells from the Chinese Communist Party operating inside these companies. This is the whole controversy around TikTok and all these other apps, right? It's that their legal structure compels them to hand over data. And so we don't need to get too far in the weeds on that. I'm not an expert on the individual laws, but this is great research to do if you're interested in diving into the weeds here. Just know that China isn't always interested in the secret sauce and the intellectual property. They want to know patterns of behavior. They want to know, how people think and behave. They want to have a platform for influence operations, things along those lines. And they do that through this network of this legal infrastructure.
I keep coming in with anecdotes because I don't have the high level information. I'm just trying to contextualize some of this stuff for you guys. So yesterday, one of the companies that I run, we had to go buy a brand new F-150. So I've got a checkbook. Let's get this truck and get the hell out of here. And my partner's sitting next to me, and they're like, can I get your wife's email address? I looked at them like, why do you need his wife's email address? Well, for the file, I got to put the information in. I'm like, not happening. Make up an email address, because I don't want to give an attack vector, because I don't know when you get breached or Ford gets breached or whatever, they don't need that attack vector. So it's just every day. And of course, I told the story to my wife. She's like, well, that was kind of rude. I'm like, I don't owe them anything. There's zero reason why they need to market to his wife. I'm here to write a check. Let me get out of here. Am 100%. I being overly cautious on that?
Not at all, Rich. Not at all. So in the bigger presentation, there's some discussion there on the National Public Database breach. Have you heard of that one?
Was that the OPM?
No. Okay. So National Public Database was last year. They're one of these data brokers, unregulated data brokers. And basically what they do is they collect information about you and I and hundreds of millions of other people in the US, including date of birth, social security number, address, phone number, email address, all this kind of stuff. They were breached last year. And I think it was 2.9 billion records maybe were stolen on 170 million people, or somebody can fact check me on that, but it was a lot of data. You all can go to NPD nancypauldavid.pentester.com and you can search your information to see if you were exposed in that breach. This is exactly what you're talking about. When you supply that information to a third party, you lose control of that information. That information can get breached as it travels through the digital, world at any point in time. So as part of the self-defense plan and the mindset piece, we have to assume breach, because once you supply that information to somebody, you don't know what they're going to do with it. And you've got to have these tools in place to monitor for the misuse of that information, right?
So if we can stop that information from ever getting public,
the
better. It's like, I don't know. I don't owe them anything. So
moving on. Yep. Russia. Okay. Very similar. Espionage, focused on espionage, intelligence gathering, pre-positioning, and critical infrastructure. In Ukraine war, we've seen both. We've seen espionage and disruption. We'll talk about that briefly. One example I wanted to provide you here, Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service, abbreviated SVR, also known as APT-29. They primarily target government networks, think tanks, so on and so forth. So if you work for one of those, you could be a direct target, right? And initial access vector. But a week after I started my job in the banking sector several years ago, they were discovered as having backdoored their way into this IT company called SolarWinds. They injected malicious code into this company, but this company supplied IT software, IT monitoring software to 18,000 businesses around the globe. So this was a massive worldwide response to a nation state attack, but it was at the business level. So the point here is that, the FBI, the military, they're not coming into the four walls of a corporation to respond to a nation state attack. It's up to cybersecurity professionals to respond, mitigate, eradicate, recover from this kind of stuff. So It was,
Does it trouble you at all? Because it kind of bothers me that we haven't fully defined what a cyber Pearl Harbor would look like. Are we in a constant state of war with these nation state actors in cyberspace currently? Would you define it that way? Or is it something that could potentially kick off or already has? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
yeah. I think if there's some great current reading you can do on this from the Director of National Intelligence, the annual threat reports they put out. But I would say this, that cyber is, I think, still in a supportive capacity to, kinetic operations. And I think this is what you see in the Ukraine. So, everybody thought that cyber was going to be front and center in the war against Ukraine, and it really has still filled a supportive role. So while I think, and I was not prior military, I didn't, I'm not familiar with our offensive operations other than from talking to colleagues who are. It's a constant battle, right? These groups, and our APT, right? The NSA is doing the same thing in other countries, and so. I think it's a constant battle, whether it's classified as war or not is kind of above my pay grade, but I think it's definitely a supportive capability and enhancement to kinetic operations is how I view it right now.
You know what's interesting about that position that you're taking? I think it's a very valid position. It reminds me of like in World War One, they didn't understand what to do with the airplane. It's never been in warfare before, so the early planners just looked at it as a means of reconnaissance. It goes up and does recon. And that was until one pilot chucked a grenade out as he was flying over the Germans and dropped a grenade into the trench and killed some folks. And somebody went, maybe there's another potential here. So the way you're phrasing that to me is to say it's an enhancement or support for a kinetic role. I think eventually it will be the kinetic role. And everything else will be subordinate to it, especially with AI. Am I overstating that?
No, I think listen, I think we're splitting hairs if we say that, Russia or China is pre-positioned in our critical infrastructure from a cyber perspective, and they use that to turn off our grid and our water and all that. I mean, that's got, that could be kinetic, right? So I think in that scenario, we haven't really seen that here on a grand scale yet. And I think when that grand scale happens, then people will start talking about cyber as
I think when I look at our MAD doctrine, mutually assured destruction doctrine, or escalation dominance doctrine, or any of these things that have kept us out of a nuclear holocaust over the last 70 years, I almost wish though that, and maybe those things are already out there and I'm just unaware of it, and Rand has already done the study, but I wish they knew the left and right lateral limits, they being these nation state actors, like, hey, just so you know, if you shut off our water, I'm going to take that as a full-on attack, and we're in a state of conflict immediately. And JDAMs are raining down on your ass. If you shut off water, if you shut off power, if you shut off something like that. So the nation state actor knows if you use those 100,000 SIM cards to shut down New York City, we're coming after you full bore, everything we got. And it ain't just going to be a cyber attack. That's what I guess what I'm getting at.
I don't disagree. I don't have that inside knowledge, and it very well could have those limits defined. But so moving on, Russia. This is the next one there, Rich.
Okay.
This is an interesting slide because it shows the perspective of exactly what you were asking about in real time. So I know it's hard to see, and I'll just summarize it for you. But the top two bars on the upper right there, that's APT 29 and APT 44. Those are two Russian advanced persistent threats. The blue is observed on the right-hand column in the espionage category. That's the example I just gave you. That's SVR. So in the Ukraine war, we see in real time the SVR doing espionage, right, against telecommunications in particular. The next one down, APT 44, that's Russia's military cyber offensive operation. And we see them in the left-hand column under destruction objectives, right? What are they aiming for? They're also aiming for, telecommunications and other critical infrastructure. So we see these two entities in Russia volleying back and forth, right? doing destructive offensive cyber against critical infrastructure. At the same time, we see SVR doing espionage against telecommunications and critical infrastructure. So this is a real-time playbook that shows, what they're likely to do against us in a similar scenario.
Why has it not been more decisive? I mean, Dr. Fuller and I we did a show in the days leading up to the invasion and after the invasion of the Ukraine, and I just thought that they'd turn the lights out and then just roll the tanks in. Is the Ukrainian cyber defense that good, or did the Russians not leverage it, or what were your thoughts on that?
I mean, based on my reading, I think they're the accelerated this war has accelerated tactics and accelerated talent, and I think Ukraine is good at defending. And of course, they got the support of the U.S. and others. So yeah, it's really I would imagine that Russia's cyber capabilities have benefited from this war as well. So moving on to North Korea. So we can just touch on this briefly because I do want to get to the self-defense plan. But North Korea is an interesting case. So obviously, North Korea is a hermit nation. They need revenue to keep. They don't have a strong economy, and they need revenue to keep their country afloat and to build their WMD program. So they've really taken on 3 strategies to do that. First, cryptocurrency theft. The second 2 are related. They've created this network of fake IT companies, and I've got the graph for that in the bigger presentation. That facilitates the fake IT worker scam as well. And what you're seeing over here on the right. So one of the most well-known cybersecurity awareness companies called KnowBe4 hired a North Korean operative. That operative was interviewed several times, presented a real identity. The gentleman on the left, his identity was stolen. They used AI to enhance the photo of the, of the operative, and he got hired. They sent him a laptop, and immediately they noted malware was being downloaded into the environment. Obviously, responded from there. But this has been in the news a lot now. So North Korea is pushing operatives out globally into IT companies, but they're really known for their cryptocurrency theft, Rich. I mean, they've, just in the latest one here where they hacked this group called Lazarus Group hacked a crypto exchange called Bybit. They stole, $1.5 billion in Ethereum, right?
Whoa.
It's incredible what they do. And I actually had the occasion to square off against Lazarus Group a few years ago. We helped a client out with a ransomware attack. And the only reason I knew it was Lazarus is because the guys that I was working with were in the cyber operations realm in the Air Force, and they recognized the intrusion sets. They recognized Lazarus. It was $1 million ransom at the time. I mean, they're all about money, but the money in this case is funneling back to the nation. So,
wow. I mean, that things like this is always. Years ago, I thought about getting into the cryptocurrency space, but then you hear stuff like this, and unless you're going to keep it on some cold storage wallet in your safe, I mean, you could lose everything, in an attack like this.
Well, so very interesting about this Bybit hack. So what they did was they compromised the signature process when Bybit was moving crypto from cold storage into warm storage, and they basically Bybit authorized the transaction and didn't realize it was getting rerouted to cryptocurrency wallets controlled by Lazarus Group. So
and think about it. People in your industry, you have to get it right 100% of the time. You just got to get it right at once, and there's $1 billion payday, right?
Yeah, I know, and that is a daily challenge.
Yeah. Says, how do we know you guys aren't a fake information technology company? Thanks, Jason.
It's a good question.
Yeah.
Deepfakes. We could talk hours about deepfakes, but it's an interesting attack vector that's brewing here as
Imagine,
AI.
I mean, my God, man, where are we going to be? Well, just think about where we are now. I remember the video of Will Smith eating spaghetti. I gasped when I saw that, and now that's nothing. I mean, it's indistinguishable from real life.
Yeah. So if I don't know if you saw the story. There was a news story last year. It was in the Baltimore school district, I think. And there was a disgruntled teacher who had used a deepfake audio to frame the superintendent. And that superintendent was basically put on administrative leave and investigated not only by the school district, but by law enforcement for 3 months until they exonerated him and figured out it was deepfake audio. Well, many of us in this show have been, subject to investigations and conducted investigations, right? And that's a stressful place to be. And
Bad.
it's a bad place to be. And so you, this deepfake thing it's dangerous. And we aren't to the point now yet where deep fakes occur in real time. So I at least have not seen where a bad actor could visually impersonate me and talk like me in real time. So we're still asynchronous there.
Well, let me say, I would say, having been doing the show for 11 years, there are thousands of hours of audio, and all my little idioms that I use in my weird nasally Southern Appalachian dialect in my image is out there.
Mhm.
And I'm sure somebody could probably cook one of these up in an hour or so that could convince, even my wife perhaps. So it's very concerning.
With about $15, 2 tools, HeyGen and 11 Labs, and maybe 10 minutes of work, I could, in a 30-second voice sample, I could impersonate your voice with those tools and put it out there, and nobody would know the difference.
That crazy.
Yeah.
Terrifying. And for an investigator, it's got to be really difficult to discern, that, and it's going to make your job more difficult there, Andrew. Dr. Gordon Botson is on. Johnny King says there is no safety for honest men except by believing all possible evil of evil men. Gerald is on in Oregon, and we have Peter joining us from Rhode Island. Good morning, gentlemen. Glad to have you on the show.
All right, moving on. So cybercrime actors, we're going to touch on, I think, one example I have in here, but the main one thing to know about cybercrime actors, motivated by financial gain, but they're often hosted in the same countries we just talked about. So they have a safety net, right? So there's a lot of ransomware actors that come out of Russia, and they're protected in Russia. So we can move into the next.
Okay, let me ask you this, because we keep coming back to the idea that they're financially motivated, but what about radical Islamists? I'm sure that ISIS or ISIL or Al-Qaeda or some Muslim terrorist organization are doing this. Are they financially motivated? Are they doing something ideologically that I have no idea about? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So in the cyber self-defense plan, especially in the bigger deck, there's a section in there on communications and protecting our youth against disinformation, misinformation, and radicalization. And so whether or not the jihadists are financially motivated, I'm sure there is an aspect of that to raise money for operations. But in terms of radicalization, which we all know is front and center these days in the news, we have to address that issue. And the only way, in my opinion, Rich, to address that issue with youth is open lines of communication, establishing solid value systems, which takes years to do. And then you've got people who are radicalized who don't have that, family structure. But we have a responsibility, I feel, as responsible adults to keep an eye on the young people in our lives to make sure they're not getting influenced by mis and disinformation.
Amen. Well said.
So what do cybercrime actors want from you? Really two things. They want your username and password, which we refer to as credentials, and they want your money. And they have lots of different ways to get it from you. And this is where we really start to get front and center with personal cyber self-defense, because you are more likely to run into a direct attack from a cybercrime actor through a phishing email or some kind of malware or information stealer that you download. So we'll talk about that here a little bit more. One thing I want you to know, cybercrime is not young gentleman living in his parents' basement. Okay. This is organized crime. So when you open up your inbox in the morning and you've got that really hard to detect phishing email, but you know it's There's something wrong with it. And they're asking you to do something urgent or whatever. It's ultimately going to lead to the compromise of your credentials or some kind of financial crime. That is most likely organized crime in your mailbox. We know that because groups like Conti, which were notorious leading up to the Ukraine war before they disbanded, there was about 60,000 messages leaked from inside that group that were reconstructed and heavily studied by the cybersecurity community. This organizational chart was reconstructed based on those chat messages. What do we see here? We see the guy in charge named Stern. We see an HR division. We see a negotiator. We see a training division. We see a blockchain division, because at the time they wanted to figure out how to get into the blockchain space. And then we see 3 operational teams, all with different functions under there. Okay. You and I, who might be unsuspecting or not paying attention one morning, we're drinking our coffee, we're checking our email, whatever. We don't have our defenses up, or maybe we're a less technical individual. We're just not paying attention to this stuff, or we don't know how to pay attention to it. We're going up against a well-funded, well-organized group like this in our inboxes.
I'm so glad you did that, because I have that bias of thinking it's some asshat in his mom's basement. But I'm looking at this, and I'm reading your slide here, and it says these attack teams are divided, and they have an average salary, which is several times higher than the average Russian developer. So if you lack moral scruples and you want to make more money as a developer, then why wouldn't you get inside of an organization like Conti and apply your skills? Wow.
So a cybercrime example that we're all familiar with, and we this was financially motivated, it was the Colonial Pipeline attack. The only thing I want to mention there is that, the ransom was paid on day 2, and it was substantial, right? It was $5 million, 75 Bitcoin at the time. That impacted a lot of people. But interestingly, Colonial Pipeline took a lot of flack for this attack, but their contingency plans actually kept oil flowing. What caused the supply issues was the run on gas stations. So this was the panic phase of the attack, right? Where while Colonial Pipeline had their IT network shut down, their OT network was still operational, oil was still flowing. Everybody made a run on gas stations, drained the supply down. Okay. That replenishing that supply took a long time. And that's what impacted families, right? They ran out of gas, oil, all that kind of stuff. And so it was a little bit misrepresented in the news that, that there was an oil flow issue that caused the supply. It was more of the demand that drained the supply based on panic. This attack was really important from a governance perspective, because it basically rung the bell in Washington and made them realize we got to reprioritize critical infrastructure.
Now, it's not just Colonial Pipeline, obviously, that gets ransomware attacks. I won't say who, but you personally were instrumental in getting one of our friends' accounts back. He was being ransomwared, I think, for $30,000 to get I think it was his Instagram account that had, hundreds and hundreds of photos and stuff. And this person was in control of it, and you were instrumental in getting that back. So again, thank you. But I just bring that out to say, what would you be willing to pay to get your social media presence back, especially if you were a professional influencer? It might be worth easily 30 grand, and you're never going to get that back. And you got to trust that they're going to do the right thing and give it back, which they may not.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that for a second. So, paying ransom is not always a moral or ethical decision, right? I mean, businesses have obligations, people have, priorities. It's better to prepare for that kind of thing, so you're not in that situation to begin with. But sometimes you've got to make that decision. Now, there's risk in that, because we're not allowed to pay sanctioned entities, individuals, countries, things along those lines. So you could be breaking the law. You also need to know that ransom payments typically fund bad things, right? Weapons of mass destruction, child exploitation, all that kind of stuff. So it's a tough call.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, moving on. Child predators. We won't get into all the weeds on this, but this is near and dear to my heart because I spent time investigating these crimes as a cop. And it's more exacerbated now because kids have smartphones, which are computers with telephone technology built into them at a much younger age. And we can have all the physical defenses we want. You can be, you can have a camera system on your house. You can be a BJJ black belt. You can be an expert marksman. But when you hand your child a smartphone, you have just given predators access to them. So how do we defeat that? You can't tech your way out of that problem. It's literally impossible. You have to monitor, right? And the younger your children are, the more you have to monitor. And I'm talking about reading texts, monitoring their social media, all that kind of stuff, establishing that value system, because the only way to defeat that problem is to make sure they can make good decisions when you're not present. So,
Yeah, this is a conundrum. As the children started getting, me and my wife wrestled with this 20 years ago. Like, do we let them get a cell phone? Number one, well, we need to be able to monitor, blah, blah, blah. Okay, great. And then are we breaking a level of trust to start going through their phone and looking at texts and stuff like that? And, the ultimate thing was no, as we're going to have to, because it's not just them and their little 12-year-old friends that are sharing silly, cat videos. It could be an adult. And ultimately we had one of those with our youngest son, a teacher in a county north of us. And I screenshot it all and we went to law enforcement and got him dealt with. But yeah, that's a real thing. And I'm sure everybody on here knows someone who's gone through that.
Yeah. So I did just want to mention the group, the company that I'm presenting here, just because I think it identifies really closely with this community, self-defense community. So Child Rescue Coalition has a long history. I helped introduce them under a different name into the state of Vermont when I was up there, but they make really beneficial software and they give it to law enforcement for free. What that software does is it tracks the dissemination, excuse me, and trading of child sexual exploitation material online. And so, if you want to get in the fight against child predators, this is one way everybody can do it. I've spoken to the CEO there, Greg Schiller. He's a great guy. He's prosecuted a lot of these cases. My wife and I donate to them every month. But what you're seeing here is a still shot of a video, and you can see this video online. Greg pointed me to it in preparation for this presentation. You'll see the dissemination, these red dots expanding out over like a 3-minute period across the globe. That is actual, what used to be referred to as child pornography. Now it's called, child sexual exploitation material. It's child sexual abuse material. I'm sorry. You'll see that expanding across the globe. Each time one of those images is shared, the child in the image is re-victimized. And I think the most victimized image is like 2.5 million trades.
Wow.
One victim. So we've got to pay attention to this stuff. And this is a great, also for parents, this company's got a lot of great material on their website to help parents out and figure out how to navigate this complex area of cyber self-defense. So
thanks for sharing that resource. And all this will be in the show notes as well, guys.
Yep. So this is how bad it gets. This was Vermont's first Amber Alert case. And I was on the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force at this time. And we led the digital investigation here. I'll summarize it for you. This poor girl, 12 years old, was lured into a home, strangled, sexually assaulted, murdered, buried in a shallow grave. What preceded that was a 5-year influence operation by this guy named Michael Jakes of another young girl. And I don't want to say too much because I think, she's probably a young woman now. 5 years, he brainwashed her with a fabricated sex ring operation called Breckenridge, brainwashed her through email and also introduced physical threats, but essentially coerced her into allowing him to abuse her. And then she lured this young woman in. And that was Vermont's first Amber Alert. In addition to the perpetrator being her uncle, her ex-stepfather participated in the cover-up. He manipulated her MySpace account. That was the social media, of choice back then, to make it look like she ran away. They deposited fake evidence to try to divert law enforcement. Ultimately, this guy was arrested, the ex-stepfather, and we put him in jail with the help of the FBI for 17 years. This got the attention of the FBI director, Robert Mueller, at the time. Horrible case. But this is what, we don't do this for shock value. We do it because if you're not paying attention, this is how bad it can get. This is the extreme end of things,
This is incredible. The length that they would go to exploit this person for 5 years. Unbelievable. I would not have thought that. I would have thought 5 days, maybe 5 weeks, but my God.
Yeah, it's horrible.
Evil, absolute evil.
This one, I would encourage this community to research this group. If you have any questions at all on how bad things can get. So 764 is under the microscope of the FBI. This is the worst of the worst in terms of organized efforts against children physically. So they are what they call a nihilistic violent extremist group that kind of spun off of Order of Nine Angels, which is a neo-Nazi group. And their whole job is to target vulnerable children. And, they have entry requirements, that are, violence, abuse, the victims 9 to 17 years old on average. Right. And they create these lore books of all of the things that they ask these children to do. And then they use that as currency in their own community. And I think you might have been from Knoxville, if I'm
that's right. Yeah.
Kyle Spitz right up there, Knoxville, Tennessee, Rich, part of this group. And it's this is good stuff for the self-defense community to learn about, because, without being paranoid, you need to know, if you don't pay attention, kids can get steered into these groups. So
I'm just, so the folks that are listening, you can't see the slide like I can. I'm reading some of it. Target vulnerable populations to include children, as well as those who struggle with a variety of mental health issues such as depression, eating disorders, suicidal ideation. Order their victims ages between 9 and 17 to commit acts of self-harm and engage in psychological torment and extreme violence against minors, young girls, cutting the symbols of their organization 764 into their bodies. I mean, this is an unbelievably heinous organization. And this is why we have JDAMs, folks. I hope they use them.
Yeah, and I don't want you to think that you're immune to it either. If you look at the note for Kyle Spitz up there, he was recruited by a woman 20 years his senior while his parents were in the midst of a divorce. So I don't have the details about what happened to that young man, but he was somehow, his mindset was converted, right, by a very experienced member of this group in the midst of his parents' divorce situation. So we can create vulnerability for our kids based on our own situation that diverts our attention, right? And that's part of this, defense plan is, don't divert that attention from your kids, no matter what you're going through in life, right? Because you could create a vulnerability that gets exploited, in another area. So,
well, you and I were of a time when mom and dad worked and I was a latchkey kid. You get off the school bus and you walk up, turn the key and went in. Now, can you imagine if we would have had the Black Mirror in our pocket at that point and nobody's there watching what you're doing? There is an ocean of these people for organizations like this to exploit. I mean, wow. I had no idea these people existed.
Bad stuff. Okay, so just recapping there on the child protection, bad guys exploit vulnerabilities and vulnerable children. Physical defenses don't do a whole lot in this space. You got to know what your kids are doing online. You got to know who's influencing them, and you got to talk to them. You can't tech your way out of safety. That's the key point there. So moving on to self-defense plan, and most of this is discussed in the bigger deck that we'll post, but I'm just going to introduce you to the self-defense plan here. The objective of personal cyber self-defense, like in physical self-defense, is to reduce your risk down to an acceptable level, right? And what's left over is what we call residual risk. How do we know if it's an acceptable level of risk? Well, are you losing sleep over it, right? Is it causing anxiety? If it is, it's not acceptable. You have to apply more countermeasures to your plan until you can sleep at night. So that's an easy way to think about any self-defense plan, in particular cyber self-defense. So you'll know when you have antivirus on your computer, when you know what your kids are up to, when you've got communicate over a VPN, when you're using end-to-end encryption, all the stuff we talk about in the cyber plan, when you've got all that in place, you've got peace of mind, you can sleep at night, the risk is not zero, but you've reduced it to an acceptable level. So,
And for those that will ultimately go in and download this plan for that Andrew has put together, the presentation we're giving you today is basically just to create awareness of the problem, more or less. And then if you want the nuts and bolts steps that you need to take, this presentation, I think, is roughly 28, 29 slides. I want to say the one that will be available for download eventually when the show is released I think it's like almost 80 slides. Yeah. And it walks you through some of the steps you need to take. So please take full advantage of that.
So the plan, and again, I fully accept that, other professionals in this space have different thoughts. This is mine. And I think if you cover these 6 areas, you can eliminate most of the threats in your digital life. Those would be mindset. We've already talked about that. Identity, protecting your identity means protecting your personal, non-public information and everything in combination that identifies you. Protecting your accounts, anything with a login, financial, social media, email, utilities, all of that kind of stuff. And in the self-defense plan, I go through exactly what you need to do to protect each of these areas. Devices and data, right? We need to protect the devices that we use, our cell phones and our laptops, even our home routers. Communications are a big one. Communications involve messaging, text messaging, social media, email, all of that. Real quickly, the easiest way to protect your communications is to use end-to-end encryption. And what that is in a nutshell is the encryption key lives on my device and not with the provider. So when the provider is ultimately breached, the bad guy only gets ciphertext. They can't see anything there, right? So when I communicate with you over Signal, or if you have an iPhone and I have an iPhone, it's end-to-end encrypted. They can't see anything. Okay. But if I'm communicating with you and you have an Android phone and I have an iPhone, that's not end-to-end encrypted, right? There's a vulnerability there, a gap. So, and then finally, your digital footprint. And for about the last year, I've been using a service called Incogni to retrieve and eliminate and suppress my information with all these data brokers, right? On the heels of the National Public Database breach. And this is something to consider because for a very small fee, you sign a consent form and they just continuously hammer these data brokers to delete your information and suppress your information so they can't actually collect and store it. And so that's kind of how you reduce your digital footprint that's out there currently.
Well, Parker says, when I decide I no longer want to be in business, I'll go prepaid flip phone that spends most of his time in a Faraday bag, as will I.
I will too.
If I wasn't, if this wasn't how I make, pay the bills kind of thing, I would probably definitely be taking that route. Do you recommend a secured messaging app, whether it's Wire, Signal, or some other thing, or just iPhone to iPhone is fine?
I mean, I use Signal for certain things. You can't always ensure that you're doing iPhone to iPhone. And I would say context is everything. So is it practical to do every single communication in Signal? No. But if there's something that, you're really concerned about, communicate in Signal. I have groups of friends that, we communicate in Signal. The other thing to consider too is if you're in the corporate world and you have only one phone that you use for company and personal, and that phone is subject to discovery at all, right? You've got to be cautious about what you make available on that device. I use 2 phones for that reason, right? One for work, one for personal. But Signal's a good app. Believe it or not, Meta's WhatsApp is end-to-end encrypted. It's just a Meta product, and my trust level is not quite there.
It's 0 with me. 0. Now, who owns Signal? Because that at one point anyway, I looked at it and I'm like, I don't trust who owns Signal, so I went with Wire for the longest time.
Yeah, I mean, Signal's I think it's a nonprofit, and I think it's open source. is well vetted by the security community. I've actually been meaning to dig into some of my past contacts to figure it out from a forensic perspective. What I know about it, based on what I've read and the open source information available, it's solid. So I don't have any
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah. The government seems to like it, but that also troubles me as well.
Yeah. So here's the budget. We don't need to get into this. And again, this is a budget based on what I do. You can modify this, the tool selection, the budget, any way you want. I've presented here the family plans for everything, which admittedly are more costly. You can also combine tools. So there's tools like that I mentioned in here. The Proton Suite offers a lot of different capabilities. You don't have to buy separate tools for things. Bitdefender does the same thing. So this is an example. Like if you didn't want to do any research, right, you could come in here and you could, purchase some or all of these tools, and it would really cover everything we're talking about in our cyber self-defense plan. It gives you an idea on cost. And I'll just say this: we pay a lot of money for home and auto insurance, typically life insurance, all this kind of stuff. People tend to forget about securing your digital life and your information as an insurance plan. And that's what these tools are, right? They're an insurance plan. They're a self-defense plan. They plug the gaps in your life so that you can sleep at night. That's what it comes down to.
I'm going to check out the Garmin InReach Messenger that one of my friends was working the disaster relief operation, and he found that the satellite phone was the only thing that was working in that place. So I definitely need to check into that.
So we'll touch on this and then we'll wrap up. Now that you have a self-defense plan in place, and you will, once you read the larger ebook there, you can apply that self-defense plan to all the threats or the most common threats that you will experience as an individual. But the key thing to remember here is that a threat is a harmful condition that materializes when a threat actor exploits a vulnerability. So what's the fix? The fix is get rid of the vulnerabilities, right? That's what you need to do. Eliminate those weaknesses and plug the gaps, and then you become a hard target and the attacker moves on.
I think it's interesting. So the attacker moves on, unless you're somebody like Pete Hegseth or Mark Zuckerberg or Elon Musk. They're always going to be getting attacked constantly. You perhaps even, Andrew, always going to be a threat. But for the average citizen, if we take these steps, I would imagine it's easy for someone to just move on to another target.
Remember the business structure, right? That I showed you with Conti.
Mm-hmm.
They have operational costs. They're not going to burn time and money attacking you if you're a hard target. They're just going to move on to the elderly population or the unsecured population, and it's a numbers game for them, right? That's it.
Yep. We had Dr. William April before he passed. We had him on the show, and he was talking about interviewing people in prison and these smashing and grab robbers and stuff. I'm like, well, what do you do? It's like, well, I'm sitting in the mall parking lot. What are you looking for? I'm looking for the white bag. It's like, what do you mean white bag? Well, the big white bag you get from the Apple store. Like, well, tell me more about that. Well, I know certain things. I see a white woman coming out, and she's got Lululemons on, and she's carrying the white bag, and she's probably going to be walking to. Yep, there she goes into a nice BMW. Yep. Guess where she's driving to? A nice house. Mm-hmm. And if she's alone, then husband's probably at work, and so you make inferences about the situation all the way through this kill chain, if you will. And so again, we're trying to deselect you. I'm a hard target. Yep. I walk out with my wife. I'm dressed a certain way. I carry myself a certain way. I probably have a bulge somewhere on my waistline indicating something. And it's like, yeah, deselect that couple. Where's the next one with a white bag? So whatever we can do in the cyberspace, I'm imagining, Andrew, to make ourselves a harder target so that we get deselected, the attackers will move on. Correct?
I love the analogy. Deselection is a perfect way to describe it. Yep.
Yeah. And that's why I like this presentation and your background, because you understand both sides of the fence, the physical and the cyber piece of this.
So I think for the audience's benefit, the bigger presentation will be the place for them to just take some time and study these cyber threats. I go into detail on a lot of the most common ones. I think the takeaway from this presentation today is there's a lot of different ways that attackers can target you, and you can't be prepared for everything individually, right? So we focus on applying the 6, steps in the cyber self-defense plan to eliminate 99% of these here. That's the goal, right? I'm only showing you here that the attackers have a giant toolbox, right? They can select whatever strategies they think are going to work for you or for a population or whatever, and we can't keep up with that as individuals, most of us, right? So we got to put our countermeasures in place the right way, and we will fend them off 99% of the time.
One final anecdote, Andrew. I'm looking through this list, and I apologize if you're listening as you're driving later in the podcast. You're gonna have to check this out. It's incredible. The list and ways that the threats from fake kidnapping to revenge porn, abuse of personal information, misinformation, disinformation, ransomware, extortion. A few years back, he's a grown man now, but at the time he was a very young, maybe 13, 14. And he comes, this is our friends. He comes knocking on his parents' bedroom door in the middle of the night. Oh my God, mom and dad, help me. What's wrong? What's going on? I'm like, well, the FBI shut down my computer. And the FBI says I need to pay $500 because he had to confess he was looking at pornography, right, to his parents.
Yeah.
Parents not knowing anything about this space, they make a $500 payment.
Mm-hmm.
And, so they're telling us this, well, we had to pay the FBI $500 because little Timmy was looking at this. That's not the way the FBI works, but they had no idea,
And what actually the other outcome of that, which unfortunately happens too often, is suicide. So
Yes.
the young men are shamed into what's happened. They don't communicate it, and unfortunately, that leads to irrecoverable decision. And all kids should know that everything's fixable, right? It might be a difficult road, but everything's fixable. And mom and dad have to have that communication line open.
And thankfully, he loved and trusted his parents enough to come and communicate it immediately. However, I remember they're looking like, Rich, do you think that was so you're saying that I was scammed last night? I'm like, yeah.
Yeah.
And they had no idea. Like, not just you use this information that Andrew is going to provide for you. Please share it with people you love, especially if they're young and vulnerable. Have these conversations around the dinner table. Pray about them with your family. Share it with you if you have elderly grandparents, that have cognitive decline. They're going to need this information. Safeguard their information. You be the adult in the room now. My mother, as she got dementia, she would have given up anything. She had no clue.
Yeah.
So let's safeguard the vulnerable people in our lives. And we do it with information and some of the tools and techniques that Andrew's given us in this presentation. Andrew, thanks so much for being on today, my friend. Where can people, I don't know that people can find and follow you, can they?
I'm on LinkedIn. That's about it.
Okay.
I joined Facebook when I joined the AWS, but I try to keep a semi-low profile online, but that's it. So you can hit me up on LinkedIn and be happy to connect with you if you have any questions about this presentation.
And if you're a member of the American Warrior Society and you're one of the 800 something folks we have in our closed group, can they reach out to you in that medium? Would that be okay?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. And I'll go ahead and, matter of fact, I'll go ahead and post it today inside our closed group, the full presentation. And then when this is released as a podcast, you'll be able to download this information as well. Kyle says, I have not watched that series. I think I better start. Gerald says, thanks. We'll have time to watch from the beginning. Okay, great. Closing thoughts, my friend.
Cyber self-defense is not outside the skill set or realm of possibilities for anybody. Don't let fear hold you back. You don't have to be perfect to defend against 99% of these attacks.
And guys, if you enjoy this presentation, you reach out to me, Rich at AmericanWarriorSociety.com, and maybe I can twist Andrew's arm and get him to come back on someday.
Anytime. My honor.
All right, guys and gals out there in Warrior Nation, remember the fight is coming. Be ready.